Hello, friends. Welcome back to Ashes in the Past. Let's journey into another incredible story from the past. Walk into any grocery store, and you'll find it for less than the price of a bottle of water. It sits quietly on restaurant tables, tucked away in kitchen cabinets, so ordinary that most of us barely notice it. Salt. Today, it's one of the cheapest products we can buy. But there was a time when a handful of these tiny white crystals could be more valuable than gold. Kings fought to control it. Empires grew rich by taxing it. Merchants crossed scorching deserts and dangerous seas carrying it across continents. Entire cities rose to power because they possessed something people could not live without. This wasn't because salt was rare. It was because it was essential. Long before refrigerators, supermarkets, or modern transportation, salt was the only reliable way to preserve food for months. Without it, meat spoiled, fish rotted, and communities faced the constant threat of hunger. Owning salt didn't simply make you wealthy, it could determine whether you survived the winter. For thousands of years, this simple mineral-shaped trade routes influenced economies, sparked conflicts, and quietly changed the course of history. Yet today, its extraordinary past has been almost completely forgotten. So how did something we now sprinkle on our meals become one of the most powerful and valuable resources the world has ever known? To answer that, we have to travel back to a time when human survival depended on a single white crystal. Thousands of years ago, food came with a race against time. A successful hunt or a plentiful harvest could feed a family for days, but not for long. Without a way to preserve it, meat spoiled within days, fish quickly became inedible, and entire harvests could be lost before the next season arrived. For early civilizations, finding food was only half the battle. Keeping it edible was the real challenge. Then people discovered something remarkable. Salt could draw moisture out of food, slowing the growth of bacteria that caused it to rot. Meat packed in salt could last for months. Fish could survive long sea voyages. Entire communities could store food through harsh winters and devastating droughts. It changed everything. With reliable food supplies, armies could march farther from home. Sailors could cross vast oceans without starving. Cities could grow larger because they were no longer completely dependent on each day's hunt or harvest. Salt wasn't just a seasoning. It became the foundation of survival. As its importance became impossible to ignore, one thing became clear. Whoever controlled the salt controlled something every person needed. And before long, kings, emperors, and entire civilizations were willing to do almost anything to possess it. Who would be the first to turn this simple white crystal into a source of immense wealth and power? It didn't take long for rulers to realize that controlling salt meant controlling people. Unlike gold or silver, salt wasn't valuable because it was beautiful. It was valuable because everyone needed it, every family, every merchant, every soldier. Demand never disappeared, making it one of the most reliable sources of wealth a kingdom could possess. Across the ancient world, governments took control of salt mines, evaporation ponds, and trade routes. Instead of allowing anyone to produce or sell it, many rulers turned salt into a state monopoly. Anyone who wanted it often had to buy it from the crown, and pay whatever price was demanded. The profits were enormous. Taxes collected on salt helped build roads, strengthen armies, and fill royal treasuries. In some regions, the revenue from salt became one of the government's largest sources of income. A single shipment could be worth a fortune by the time it reached distant markets. But where there is great wealth, there is always competition. As kingdoms fought to secure the richest salt deposits and merchants carried the precious mineral across continents, entirely new trade routes began to emerge. Routes that would shape the rise of cities, connect distant civilizations, and transform the world economy. How far were people willing to travel for something they simply couldn't live without? To meet the world's growing demand, salt had to travel. From underground mines, coastal salt pans, and desert lakes, merchants loaded caravans with sacks of white crystals and set off on journeys that could last weeks, or even months. They crossed scorching deserts, climbed steep mountain passes, and sailed unpredictable seas, risking bandits, storms, and exhaustion for a cargo that was worth its weight in survival. Some of history's most important trade routes existed because of salt. Across the Sahara Desert, long camel caravans carried massive loads between North and West Africa. In Europe, ancient roads connected salt mines to distant cities, turning quiet settlements into thriving centers of commerce. Wherever salt flowed, wealth often followed. The trade did more than move a valuable mineral. It carried ideas, cultures, technologies, and goods across continents. Markets flourished, cities expanded, and kingdoms grew richer with every successful journey. But transporting salt came at a cost. Every mile increased its value, and every kingdom along the route wanted a share of the profits. Soon, rulers realized they didn't just want to trade salt. They wanted to control it. And when power depends on a single resource, conflict is never far behind. As salt became harder to control, its value continued to rise. In many parts of the world, it was treated almost like money. Merchants exchanged it for grain, livestock, cloth, and other valuable goods. In regions where coins were scarce, salt itself became a trusted medium of exchange because everyone recognized its worth. Governments understood its power. Rather than simply selling salt, they imposed heavy taxes on it, knowing people had no choice but to pay. The more essential the resource, the easier it was to turn it into a source of wealth. For some kingdoms, salt taxes became one of the largest contributors to the royal treasury. The mineral even found its way into language. The English word salary is often linked to the Latin word salarium, a payment or allowance associated with salt, reflecting just how closely this humble crystal was connected to economic life in the ancient world. While historians debate exactly how Roman soldiers were compensated, the connection itself reveals salt's remarkable importance. By now, salt was far more than a seasoning. It had become a symbol of wealth, power, and control. But whenever governments place a high price on something people cannot live without, resentment begins to grow. And before long, salt would become more than a source of riches. It would become a reason for rebellion and war. When a resource is essential for survival, controlling it means controlling people. Throughout history, kingdoms fought to capture salt mines, protect trade routes, and dominate the markets that depended on them. A rich salt deposit could finance armies, strengthen economies, and shift the balance of power between rival states. But not every battle was fought with swords. Sometimes, the greatest weapon was a tax. Few examples are more famous than the French salt tax, known as the gabelle. For centuries, it forced many people to buy salt from the government at inflated prices. Smuggling became widespread, prisons filled with offenders, and public anger continued to grow. The tax became so deeply unpopular that it contributed to the resentment that eventually fueled the French Revolution. Centuries later, salt once again became a symbol of resistance. In 1930, Mahatma Gandhi challenged British rule in India by leading the Salt March, a peaceful protest against Britain's monopoly on salt production and taxation. By simply making salt from seawater, thousands of ordinary people defied an empire, proving that even the smallest crystal could become a powerful symbol of freedom. Salt had built fortunes, funded kingdoms, and inspired revolutions. Yet its reign was about to end. A new invention would change the way humanity stored food forever, and transform one of history's most valuable resources into something so common that most people would never think twice about it. For thousands of years, salt had been one of humanity's most valuable resources. Then, its greatest advantage disappeared. During the 19th and 20th centuries, industrialization transformed the way people lived. Railways and steamships made transportation faster and cheaper, allowing salt to be moved in enormous quantities. New mining techniques uncovered vast deposits, making what was once scarce far more abundant. But the biggest change came with refrigeration. For the first time in history, people no longer depended on salt to keep food from spoiling. Meat, fish, dairy products, and vegetables could be stored safely without covering them in crystals. The resource that had once determined whether families survived the winter was no longer the only answer. Almost overnight, at least by historical standards, salt lost the extraordinary power it had held for centuries. Its price fell. Its monopolies weakened. Its political influence faded. The white crystal that had shaped kingdoms, financed wars, and inspired revolutions became something so ordinary that it found its place on nearly every dining table in the world. But don't mistake ordinary for unimportant. Even today, salt quietly continues to shape our lives in ways most of us never notice. How can something so common still be one of the world's most essential resources? Although salt no longer determines the fate of empires, its importance never truly disappeared. It simply changed. Today, billions of people use salt every day, often without realizing how deeply modern life still depends on it. Beyond seasoning food, it plays a vital role in preserving products, producing chemicals, treating water, manufacturing glass and paper, and even helping generate the electricity that powers our homes. In cold countries, millions of tons of salt are spread across roads each winter to melt ice and keep transportation moving. Hospitals rely on saline solutions to treat patients. Farmers use it to care for livestock. Industries use it to manufacture countless everyday products. The crystal that once preserved civilizations now quietly supports modern society. Yet because salt is so abundant and inexpensive, we rarely stop to appreciate it. Its greatest achievement may be that it became so accessible that most people no longer think about where it comes from or why it matters. History has a way of hiding the importance of things that become ordinary. But salt's story reminds us of a surprising truth. Value isn't always determined by rarity. Sometimes, the things we overlook are the very foundations of civilization. So was salt really more valuable than gold? Or have we been measuring value the wrong way all along? Was salt really worth more than gold? In terms of price, not always. Gold has long been rarer and more expensive by weight. But history teaches us that true value is not measured by rarity alone, it's measured by necessity. A king could own a vault filled with gold, but without salt, his armies couldn't preserve food, his merchants couldn't sustain long journeys, and his people would struggle to survive. Gold represented wealth. Salt made that wealth possible. That is why civilizations built roads for it, governments taxed it, merchants risked their lives to transport it, and ordinary people fought against those who controlled it. Few resources have influenced so many aspects of human history while asking for so little attention. Today, a small container of salt costs almost nothing. We sprinkle it onto our meals without a second thought, rarely imagining that the same white crystals once shaped economies, fueled revolutions, and connected continents through trade. Sometimes, history's greatest treasures aren't the rarest things on Earth. They're the things humanity simply couldn't live without. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson the amber room, gold, and salt all share. What we value most often changes with time, but what sustains civilization leaves the deepest mark on history.